When I walk out to my woodpile in January, the wind cutting across the Lancaster County hayfield doesn't just blow. It bites straight through heavy wool and denim. The thermometer nailed to the oak post says 15 degrees. Down the road, my English neighbor is sitting at his kitchen table, staring at a piece of paper. It's his heating bill for the month, $340. And there is still half of the winter left to face. In his basement, a furnace is roaring, burning up fuel he doesn't own. Electric fans are pushing dry, dusty air through tin ducts, and a little plastic box on his wall keeps demanding more. He has no real say in it. Every month, that bill arrives like a tax on his right to stay warm. Now, step inside my kitchen. The same wind is rattling the outer storm windows, but inside the air is perfectly still and steady. The bare pine floor is warm under your wool socks. The soapstone bench along the wall is gently warm to the touch, like a boulder that's been sitting in the August sun all afternoon. There is no fan blowing, no furnace humming in the cellar, no wire running from a utility pole to the corner of our roof. There is only a small fire, no bigger than 2 hands, burning inside a heavy masonry heater in the center of the room. A fire so small you would think it couldn't keep a hound dog warm, yet the whole house is comfortable, and it will stay that way until tomorrow morning. My name is Elias Yoder. I am an Amish farmer, and this is how my people have kept the frost out of our bones for 200 years in this county, using methods that good farmers in the cold parts of the old world perfected 1,000 years before that. Today, I am going to share this old knowledge with you. Not to sell you a kit or a plan, but to show you what is possible when you stop relying on a wire and start relying on the laws of nature. Stop and think about this for a minute. Why do we accept that staying alive in the winter must cost a week's wages every single month? How did our grandfathers build homes that stayed warm without a single watt of electricity? They didn't have secret technology. They had an understanding of materials, weight, and time. What the old world masons called a cockle oven or a Russian stove, modern engineering calls a high-mass radiant heater. The names change, but the physics stay the same. It is a method verified by centuries of survival and confirmed by modern thermodynamic testing. It works because it changes how we handle fire. But understand this clearly before we go any further. I am not offering you a lazy man's miracle. These methods are honest, and honesty means acknowledging the limits. If you live in a modern house built out of thin drywall and cheap glass, with drafts whistling through the baseboards, a traditional heater will not save you. You cannot just drop a 5-ton stone stove into a room with a weak floor without the whole thing crashing into the cellar. And more than that, when you bring fire inside your home without a computer to watch it, you take your life into your own hands. If you vent a flue poorly, or if you ignore the buildup of soot, the gases can kill a household in their sleep. This knowledge requires respect, a clear head, and the absolute requirement of a carbon monoxide alarm. The safety is non-negotiable. Walk before you run. Let us look at the first method, the heavyweight champion of traditional heating, the masonry heater. A standard iron-wood stove is what most folks know. You put wood in, it gets red hot, and it throws heat immediately. But the moment the wood burns down to ash, the iron cools and the room goes cold. You find yourself waking up at 2 in the morning, shivering, dragging yourself out of bed to throw another log on the coals. That is a regular stove. A masonry heater does the exact opposite. It is a massive tower of brick, stone, or fireclay built right into the heart of the house. Inside, it does not hold a long, slow, smoky smolder. It burns a hot, fast, roaring fire. The air screams through the firebox, reaching temperatures that burn up nearly every bit of smoke and vapor. You can hear it when it runs. Not a lazy hiss, but a deep, clean rumble like a distant train. The wood turns to white-hot gas, leaving almost nothing behind but a fine, powdery ash as soft as talc. Now, in a common fireplace, that immense heat goes straight up the brick chimney to warm the winter sky. It is a terrible waste. But inside a masonry heater, The smoke is forced down a long, winding labyrinth of internal stone channels. It travels up, down, and around, giving up its heat to the heavy stone walls with every turn it makes. By the time that smoke finally escapes into the outside air, it is barely warm to the touch. The stone has stolen all the energy. The stone becomes a thermal battery. It soaks up that intense heat from a 1-hour burn, and then spends the next 18 hours gently, steadily radiating it back into the room. One armload of seasoned oak in the morning, and the stone does the rest, while you work the fields or sleep through the night. It sounds simple when you hear it, but the way those internal channels must be shaped to balance the draft and catch the heat is where the true mastery lies. If the throat is too wide, the heat escapes. If it is too narrow, the smoke backs up into your living room. My grandfather used to say that a good mason builds a stove the way a watchmaker builds a clock. Every channel must measure exactly right to make the air move where it should. I want to show you exactly how this looks when we lay out the internal path, and how a few simple modifications can allow anyone to adapt this principle, even if you are building with common materials on a budget. Let us step closer to the heater, look inside the clean outdoors, and examine the exact blueprint of how this stone traps the fire. To understand how to build one of these heaters with your own hands, we must look at the mortar, the brick, and the mud. I am going to show you how to lay out a small-scale mass bench, the kind of project a patient man can build in a workshop or a small cabin using common red clay, sharp sand, and fire brick. It is the simplest way to put this old knowledge to work without a mason's license. First, you must understand the mud. We do not use modern Portland cement here. Standard cement is rigid. When intense fire hits it, it expands unevenly, cracks, and turns to dust. We go back to what the old country builders used, a simple mixture of fire clay and clean, sharp builder's sand. If you dig down 3 feet in most creek beds in this county, you will find a heavy grayish-red clay that sticks to your spade like cold lard. That is your binder. You dry that clay in the sun until it is hard as stone, smash it with a wooden mallet into a fine powder, and sift it through a screen until it is as soft as flour. When you mix it, you want 2 parts of sand to 1 part of clay. You add water slowly, working it with a hoe, or, better yet, stepping into the trough with bare feet to feel the consistency. You want it to look like thick, dark peanut butter. It should hold its shape when you squeeze a ball of it in your palm, but it shouldn't leave your hand wet. It has a smell you will never forget, the clean, damp scent of deep earth, mixed with a faint hint of ancient iron. That mortar is alive. When the fire gets hot, the clay expands at the exact same rate as the bricks it holds together. It breathes with the heat. The second thing you must prepare is the foundation. A heater that holds heat must be heavy, and that weight cannot sit on bare floorboards. For a small bench heater, you need to clear down to a solid concrete pad or stone cellar arch. On top of that foundation, you must lay an insulating layer. This is where many beginners make their first bad mistake. They think, I want heat, so I will build my stove directly on the cold stone floor. Stop and think about that. The cold earth beneath your house is a giant heat sponge. If you do not insulate the bottom of your heater, half of your fire's energy will leak straight down into the dirt, wasted forever. We lay down a thick bed of pumice stone or lightweight insulating fire bricks first, creating a barrier that forces the heat to stay up in the room where your feet are. Now, look at the firebox itself, the core where the screaming heat is born. Here, you use nothing but high-duty yellow fire brick. These bricks are heavy, dense, and cream-colored, made of a special clay that can withstand 2,000 degrees without flinching. You lay them tight, with joints no thicker than the blade of a pocket knife. The firebox must be a narrow, vertical throat, shaped like the letter J. The short side is where you drop your wood. The long side is the insulated chimney riser inside the heater. Here is the secret to the draft that trips up almost everyone who tries to build their first stove. The cross-sectional area of that internal channel must stay exactly the same from the moment the air enters the wood box to the moment the smoke leaves the chimney pipe. If your firebox throat is 6 inches by 6 inches, every turn, every internal passage, and the final flue must measure exactly 36 square inches. If you widen it out somewhere, the air slows down, cools, and drops its soot. If you narrow it down, the heater chokes, and thick, acrid smoke will pour out of the feed lid into your kitchen, stinging your eyes and ruining your house. Once the firebox core is set and dry, you connect the horizontal exhaust duct. This is the pipe that will run through your seating bench. We use heavy gauge, 6-inch stovepipe, wrapping it carefully in galvanized steel wire to give the mud something to grip. You lay this pipe down the length of where you want to sit, keeping it slightly sloped upward, about 1/4 of an inch for every foot of length. So the warm air naturally coaxes itself towards the outside wall around this pipe. You build the mass, the actual bench. We build the outer walls of the bench out of common red building bricks or field stones gathered from the rows. Inside these walls, surrounding the metal pipe, we pack the cob. Cob is a traditional mix of that same red clay, sharp sand, and long, dry oat straw. The straw acts like the iron rebar in modern concrete. It binds the mud together so it cannot crack as it dries. You pack this mix in with your hands, throwing it down hard around the pipe to eliminate any air pockets. Listen to the sound as you work. It should be a solid, heavy thud. An air pocket inside your bench is an insulator. It will block the heat from reaching the seat. You want solid mud and stone from the metal pipe all the way to the outer skin. As you work the straw into the mud, you will notice the smell changes. It becomes sweet, like a damp hay barn in August. You build the bench up until it is about 18 inches high and 2 feet wide. The perfect height for a man to sit and rest his back against the wall after a long day in the woods. When you finish packing the mass, you smooth the top with a wooden trowel until it is even. Now comes the hardest part of the entire project for a modern man. You must wait. A newly built heater contains gallons of water trapped inside the clay and cob. If you light a roaring fire in a green, wet stove, that water will instantly turn to steam, expand, and blow your beautiful brickwork to pieces from the inside out. You must let it sit for 3 weeks, letting the January wind dry it naturally until the dark, wet red of the clay turns to a pale, dusty rose color. Only then do you light your first small, thumb-sized fire of splinters to gently bake the core hard. It is a slow process, built with simple tools and raw earth. But when that 3 weeks is up and you light that first true armload of oak, you will see the magic happen. The smoke goes down instead of up, the bench begins to hum with life, and you realize you have built something that will keep you warm without costing a single dime to the power company. But how do you start that first fire when the chimney is cold and the air wants to push back? That is what we must look at next. Now that you see how the bricks are laid and how the mud is mixed, we need to take a step back and look at why this works. A lot of folks look at a mass heater and think it is some kind of magic or a trick of the mind. It is not. It is simple, unyielding science. The kind of science that doesn't care about opinions or fashions. It works because it follows the natural laws of how heat moves and how wood burns. To understand the first principle, look at a dry autumn leaf and a heavy creek stone sitting side by side in the morning sun. After an hour, the leaf is still cool to the touch, but the stone has swallowed the sun's rays and feels warm. If a cloud rolls in and covers the sky, the leaf turns cold instantly. The stone stays warm for hours, what the university scholars call thermal mass and heat capacity. A farmer calls a heavy heat sponge. A standard cast iron stove is like that autumn leaf. Iron is a wonderful conductor. It lets heat pass through it almost instantly. But it is a terrible keeper. It cannot hold on to what it receives. The moment the fire dies down inside an iron stove, the metal goes cold, and the room follows right behind it. A mass heater uses hundreds or thousands of pounds of stone, brick, or mud to act like that creek stone. It takes a massive amount of energy to get that stone hot, but once that heat is inside the belly of the masonry, it is trapped. The stone holds on to that energy and doles it out to the room like a parsimonious old man spending his life savings, 1 penny at a time, through the chill of the night stop. And think about how that heat reaches your skin. My English neighbor's furnace works by convective heat exchange. It warms up the air, and then a noisy fan pushes that hot air across the ceiling. But air is thin, flighty stuff. It doesn't want to stay down where you are sitting. And the moment someone opens the kitchen door to fetch a bucket of water, that expensive warm air rushes outside to warm the barnyard. A masonry heater doesn't care about the air. It warms the room through radiant heat. Understand this. Radiant heat is the exact same energy that travels 93 million miles through the freezing vacuum of space to warm your face on a clear January morning. When you stand in the winter sun behind a closed window glass, the air outside might be 10 degrees, but you feel the heat soaking into your wool coat. That is because radiant energy travels in straight lines until it hits a solid object, a wall, a floor, or a person, and warms that object directly. A mass heater turns the whole living room into a warm pocket where the chairs, the floorboards, and the people are all holding heat. So a draft of wind from an open door doesn't strip the warmth away. Now look at the fire itself. When you see thick, dark smoke billowing out of a chimney down the road, you are watching unburnt fuel and money leak into the sky. Wood doesn't actually burn as a solid. When you heat wood, it releases volatile organic compounds, what we call wood gases. In a regular stove, if you choke the air down to make the fire last all night, the firebox drops below 1200 degrees. At that lower temperature, those wood gases cannot ignite. They simply escape up the flue as smoke, leaving thick, dangerous creosote stuck to the inside of your chimney like black tar. Inside the narrow firebox of a mass heater, we do the opposite. We give the fire all the air it wants, forcing the temperature up to 1500 or even 1800 degrees. At that heat, the smoke itself catches fire. It burns completely, converting almost every bit of the wood's energy into pure heat and leaving nothing but clear, shimmering carbon dioxide and water vapor to exit the chimney. You are getting twice the heat out of every stick of wood because you are actually burning the smoke. But let us be completely honest about the boundaries of this method. I am a practitioner, not a salesman, and this system is not a cure-all for every home or every life. It has real hard limitations that you must understand before you lay a single brick. First, a mass heater is a terrible choice for a house that is left empty most of the week. This is because of what we call thermal lag. If you go to a cold hunting cabin for a weekend and light a masonry heater, you will sit there shivering in your coat for 6 or 8 hours while the stone swallows the heat. By the time the bench finally gets warm and starts radiating heat into the room, it will be Sunday evening and time for you to pack your bags and go home. A mass heater requires a steady lifestyle. It is built for a home where someone is living every day, keeping the stone primed and ready. Second, understand the limitation of your building's structure. You cannot put a 5-ton masonry heater or a 2-ton cob bench on top of a standard wooden floor joist system in a modern suburban home. If you try it, the floor will sag, the plaster will crack, and you risk the entire structure collapsing into your basement. These heaters belong on the ground floor, built directly on a reinforced concrete pad or a solid stone foundation that goes all the way down to the bedrock or solid earth. Third, this system is a partner to the house, not a savior. If your home has thin walls with no insulation, ancient single-pane windows that rattle in the wind, and spaces under the doors where you can see the white snow outside, a mass heater will fail you. It will radiate its heat faithfully, but the cold wind will strip that heat off the walls faster than the stone can replace it. You will find yourself burning fire after fire, exhausting your woodpile, and overheating the core of the stove until the bricks crack. The house must be reasonably sealed and insulated for the mass to do its job. Finally, look at your fuel. A mass heater is designed to burn dry, seasoned wood, small logs, branches, or trimmings that have sat under a shed roof for at least a full year until the moisture is below 20%. If you feed it green, wet wood fresh from a fallen maple, the water inside the wood will swallow the heat of the fire just to turn into steam. The firebox temperature will drop, the complete combustion will fail, the internal channels will clog with wet soot, and the stove will choke on its own breath. If you do not have the patience to prepare your fuel a year in advance, you have no business building a mass heater. This is the honest reality of the old ways. They give you independence, and they cut your bills to nothing, but they demand your time, your labor, and a proper understanding of your space. They are a contract between the builder, the house, and the climate. Now, if your house is ready, your foundation is strong, and your wood is dry, you are ready to learn how to manage the draft and light that very first fire. The lineage of the stone. When my ancestors crossed the Atlantic Ocean to settle this valley 2 centuries ago, they brought very little with them that could fit inside a wooden traveling chest. They had no wealth to speak of, no fine tools, and no grand machinery. But they carried something far more valuable inside their minds, the memory of the stone, and the tested knowledge of how to live through a bitter winter without becoming a servant to a landlord or a merchant. If you look back through the old books and historical records of Europe, you will find that the masonry heater was the silent guardian of the common people for generations. In the middle of the 18th century, around the year 1767, the Kingdom of Sweden was facing a quiet, terrifying disaster. The country was running completely out of firewood. The great iron foundries and the inefficient, wide-open stone fireplaces of the towns were swallowing timber faster than the forests could grow it back. The winters were not getting any milder, and people were genuinely afraid of freezing in their own beds. To solve this crisis, King Adolf Frederick did not look for a new territory or a magical fuel. He commissioned 2 men, an architect named Carl Gustav Cronstedt and a general named Fabian Rady, to fix the way people burned wood. They took the heavy, traditional masonry stoves used by the rural folks and systematically redesigned the internal passages. They created what we now call the 5-flue contraflow system. This design forced the smoke to travel up and down through 5 vertical stone chambers before it could leave the house. The result was a revolution. A single load of wood suddenly lasted all day long. The Swedish forests were saved from the axe, and the country survived its resource crisis because of an intelligent rearrangement of bricks farther east, out across the endless, wind-swept plains of Russia. The peasant families survived winters that would make our Pennsylvania January look like a mild spring afternoon. They did it by building the pechka, the great Russian masonry stove. This wasn't a mere appliance shoved into a kitchen corner. It was a massive clay and brick monument built in the exact center of the log izba, or farmhouse. It was so large and held heat so reliably that the flat top of the stove itself served as the main bed for the family. The old folks and the young children slept directly on top of the warm masonry, protected from the deadly drafts that crept along the floorboards. It was the absolute heart of their domestic architecture. What the Goges prove now. Some folks look at my home, they see the lack of wires, and they assume we live this way, simply because we are stubborn or sentimental about the past. They think traditional crafts are based on nothing but old wives' tales and folklore. But understands, modern engineering has spent decades proving that those old-world masons understood thermodynamics perfectly, even if they used different words to describe it. If you read the technical bulletins from modern research bodies, like the Masonry Heater Association of North America or the intensive combustion studies conducted at the Lopez Labs in Washington State, the data is clear and unyielding. When modern researchers hook up digital temperature probes and exhaust gas analyzers to a traditional masonry heater, the metrics show a level of performance that puts modern fossil fuel systems to shame. Thermal efficiency. A standard open brick fireplace operates at a miserable 10 to 15% efficiency, meaning 85% of your fuel's energy is lost to the sky. A modern iron wood stove might achieve 60% efficiency if you manage the dampers perfectly. A certified masonry heater, however, consistently operates between 80 and 90% thermal efficiency. Almost every calorie of heat contained in the wood fibers is extracted and stored within the mass, particulate emissions. Because the fire inside the masonry core burns fast and hot, frequently exceeding 1500 degrees, the combustion is nearly absolute. Modern lab tests confirm that the particulate emissions from a properly designed mass heater are under 2 grams per hour. This satisfies the strictest environmental standards in the world, and it accomplishes this clean burn naturally, without the use of fragile catalytic converters or electrical filtration systems. Creosote elimination. Because the wood gases are completely consumed in the intense heat of the initial burn, the volatile tars are destroyed before they ever reach the chimney. The data shows that creosote accumulation in these systems is reduced by nearly 95% compared to conventional wood stoves. This virtually eliminates the danger of a catastrophic chimney fire, making the home fundamentally safer. The choice before you. Look at the reality of the system we have walked through. It is an honest solution tested by centuries of survival, confirmed by modern instruments, and built out of the very earth beneath our feet. The richest man is not the one who has the most money in the bank, but the one who requires the least from the world outside his own front gate. My English neighbor will continue to look out at his hayfield every January, and he will continue to feel that knot of worry in his stomach when the heating bill arrives in his mailbox. He has given up his control over his own comfort to a distant company, a network of wires, and a fuel line running under the road. If the power grid blinks, his house goes cold within 3 hours, no matter how much money he has in his pocket. You do not have to live your life under that constant demand. The old knowledge is still here, completely unchanged by time, and it belongs to you just as much as it belongs to my family in this valley. You do not need to go out tomorrow and spend $20,000 on a massive stone tower, nor do you need to tear your entire house apart this week. Start exactly where you stand. Begin by changing how you look at your home. Spend an afternoon finding the cold air leaks around your windows and seal them with simple caulk or felt. Look at where the winter sun falls across your floors during the day. And think about how you can use that free light. If you are a person who works with your hands, buy a couple of fire bricks and mix a small bucket of clay mortar just to feel the consistency of the mud between your fingers. Get the books, read the building manuals. Study the drawings of the old Swedish flues and the modern rocket benches. These are real skills with a real learning curve, but they are simple, accessible, and entirely within the reach of any patient person who is willing to slow down and learn. It is the difference between paying a monthly bill for the rest of your days or making a one-time investment in your own capability. Take your life back into your own hands. Learn the laws of nature, respect the fire, and build a home that stays warm on its own terms. Thank you for sitting by my stove with me today. Find your cold drafts, follow the sun, and remember that the warmest house in the village is almost always the one that nobody is paying a bill on.